Thank you. We're now live, Chair.
Brilliant. Thank you. Welcome again to Strategy Scrutiny meeting this evening. It's really great to see everyone here. May I ask for substitutes, Diane?
Yes, Chair. We have Councillor Audrey Smith is substituting for Councillor Megan Swift, and we have apologies from Councillor Megan Swift and Councillor Parsons-Hulst.
Perfect. In that case, welcome Councillor Smith to the meeting. Admission of the public. Yeah, we're live on YouTube. No exempt items. Public are allowed. Minutes of the last meeting, item number 4.
Sorry, Chair, did you mention members' interests there? Did you skip over?
Oh, sorry, no, I skipped over members' interests. Let's go back to number 2, item number 2. Members' interests. Does any member have any interest on pecuniary interest on any item on the agenda? Yeah, Councillor Sutherland.
There's an item on youth work later in the agenda, and I am employed in a youth work organisation, HIMAT, so I just wanted to say that at the start, but I don't think there's any conflict of interest beyond that.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Sutherland. Any other interest, members, or otherwise? No. Perfect. Okay then. Item number 3. Yeah, public. We're on YouTube. Public are allowed and watching. Item number 4, minutes of the last meeting held on the 21st of September. Are there any comments on the meeting, on the minutes at all? No. In that case, can I propose them as a true and accurate record? Can I have a seconder? Councillor Barnes. All in favour, please. Yeah, and that's passed. That's unanimous. Okay then. So onto the substantive items. Now, Ian has mentioned he's currently at the town hall, and he'll therefore have to dial out at 7 o'clock. It's been suggested that we move item number 6 to item number 5. Now, I don't want to inconvenience anyone at item number 5. So please could anyone presenting on item number 5, I think Robin, Jez, and I'm guessing it would be Councillor Scullion. Could you confirm, is that okay with you if we just rejig things a little bit?
That's fine. Yes, I'm sure the young people don't particularly want to sit through our corporate plan. I'm sure they'll find it fascinating. But yeah, that's fine, Chair.
Perfect. Okay, then in that case, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. Members, is that okay with members? I don't think we need to put it to a vote, but is there any disagreement in the room? No. Okay then, brilliant. So in that case, the new item number 5, political engagement. Thank you, Mike. Sorry, Mike, you're on mute.
I was just going to remind members that we circulated an additional paper a few days ago, and I sent it out again today as a reminder, which came from the young people. So there's one paper in your agenda pack and one paper that we circulated by email twice.
Yeah, and that was over email.
And I think Ian is going to start this item, Chair.
Perfect. Well, in that case, I'll pass on to Ian, if I may, and then I'll bring in Claire from the youth service, and then I understand that we've got some distinguished guests tonight, so then we can hear from them too. Thank you for the reports. I thoroughly appreciate them, and they're a good read as well. So Ian, may I pass on to you, please?
Thank you, Chair. My thanks to those involved in the initial item 5 for moving it back. So this matter can come first to ensure that I'm not kicked out of the town hall at an inappropriate time. Chair, this report has come to you because of a discussion that members had back in the summer around the concern being expressed about engagement by the council with particularly young people, but with the electorate as a whole, to ensure that we were doing all we could to encourage and promote political engagement and particularly voting throughout Calderdale. The report therefore seeks to set out the work that can be undertaken by electoral services to encourage that engagement with the democratic process of voting particularly, but also with engaging with the council. And it seeks to explain that whilst there are steps that we do take and can take, there is a limit because of the need for that engagement to be politically neutral as to what is done. So it sets out at section 2 of the report the contribution that electoral services makes, and its duty really to maintain the electoral register and ensure that all those who are eligible are registered on that voting register and are encouraged to vote. So there are various ways in which that's done. There's the register that takes place, or the update of the register every year through the annual household canvass period, and that is something that is regularly undertaken, as I said, every year to ensure that we assess houses in multiple occupation or the residential properties within the borough, care homes, etc., to ensure that we have a very accurate picture of those who are entitled to vote. Inevitably, throughout the year, there is a churn of people moving in and out of the borough and moving houses, even within the borough. And we need to make sure that we're up to date with those who either forget or aren't aware of the need to re-register if they've done either of those two things. We also, particularly with young people, look to engage with schools, sixth form colleges and other student events, as the report sets out, and try to make people aware, particularly young people, of the approach that's taken and the ability that they have to register to vote, to ensure that they engage with the political process. Sorry, Councillor Barnes.
Yes, sorry, I'm just slightly. Why is encouraging people to vote not politically neutral? You're not encouraging them to vote for any particular party or any particular image. You're just encouraging them to vote. Surely that is political neutral in its own right, as well as getting them to register to vote. Physically encouraging people to vote is not a party political matter, surely.
No, well, I think I said that we were doing both. We are encouraging people to engage with the political process. What we can't do is obviously to steer them in any particular direction as to how they cast that vote, but encouraging them people to vote and use that that democratic right that they have is part of the process that we undertake. Yes.
Yeah, well, I think we'll take questions afterwards because we don't want to interrupt flow. So yeah.
Okay. So therefore, the work that is undertaken is limited because of the processes that we have to be mindful that we have to undertake and remain as an electoral services section politically neutral in that respect. But certainly encouraging people to register and encouraging people to use the vote once they have registered is part of the duty that is imposed upon the electoral registration officer to ensure that there are as many people as possible on that register. As well as working with directly with households in the way that I've described, we then look to engage with the council's communications team, as is set out on page 42, I think, of the ModGov pack, to encourage people to remind them of the process that's involved, remind them when an election is taking place, and to ensure that we look to ensure that the engagement that we have with the electorate as a whole is done in that way. Other ways are to deal with the matters I've said through the other forms of communication that we have by putting up posters, etc. Because obviously we recognise not everyone is engaged through the social media process. And we also send out various documents, and one is in your pack at Appendix 1B, which is have your say why voting is important. I think, Councillor Barnes, that will sort of set out and explain that it's not just registering, it's telling people why they should vote and why voting is important. So there is that engagement that we can have As I've said, though, obviously that has to be something that says, well, you can vote, but how you vote is entirely a matter for you, and based on your assessment then of the political manifestos and the political canvassing that takes place, as you'd expect. So, Chair, that's the summary that I can go through as far as the electoral services are concerned. I understand, obviously, there is a contribution that's to be made by young people, particularly, so that they can inform you of whether any of that touches them, whether any of that works for them, or whether there are better ways that they can suggest as to how we engage with young people in the borough. But that's the current process. Obviously happy to take any further questions either at this stage or when you've heard from others contributing to this item.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. Thank you very much. In that case, if I think we're really excited to hear from Will and Sudesh. If Claire permits it, Claire, would you like to provide a bit of an interlude, or shall we go straight and hear from Will and Sudesh?
No, sorry, for some reason my camera's not come on.
No,
but I just want to say we've really appreciated working with Ian Gledhill, particularly in the last 6 months. I think with the Youth Council, he's come along, and to be fair to Will and Sudesh, and I don't know if they're going to say this, we've designed some lesson plans that we've sent out to schools to try and encourage young people to participate more actively, because obviously the Youth Council's looking to recruit new members. I suppose one of the difficulties that we've had is actually getting recognition of that role with schools. So I know Will's going to make a bit of a plea about that. And I know Sudesh is doing some assemblies in his school after this half term around young people's participation in the democratic process. And that's just a bit of an understanding as to why voting matters. Again, trying to be as neutral as possible, but talking about the issues that matter to young people, finding out what they are, so that the Youth Council does know that they're working in the way that the young people of Calderdale want to see change happening. But my name's on the paper, but really it was written by Will, Sudesh and the other members of the Youth Council. So I'm going to hand over to them now, though I can answer any questions if people want to ask them.
Perfect. On that bombshell, thank you, Claire. So Will and Sudesh, welcome to the strategy scrutiny meeting. It's good to see you both. Thank you so much for the report. Really do appreciate it. It's incredible detail, but succinct at the same time, which sometimes we as councillors struggle to achieve. So thank you very much for that. Please, could you therefore provide a bit of a background about yourself? Maybe do you see, what I'm interested to know, first of all, do you see engagement with young people as a problem? You might think it's fine, but do you see it as a problem? And then in which case, what are we doing wrong? And then how do we improve? I think that might hopefully provide you a bit of a steer of where we're going with this. Will, do you want to start?
Yeah, so a bit of background on Youth Council for those who haven't come across us, who haven't worked with us before. We sit under or work with the engagement panel and the voice panel, which is what the voice part of the council, which is what Claire is paid under. And so we do work with members from different schools, from different youth organisations. Come together, we sit on the Climate Change Working Party, that's changing its name to the Climate Change Partnership, I think, and then the Children and Young People Scrutiny Board as sort of permanent co-optees. We also get invited to other committees like this one, which we're very grateful for. And so when we were asked to write the report on youth voice and youth engagement, what we wanted to do was set out the sort of broad principle of why youth engagement and youth voice is important, particularly when we look at the Youth Council's age range of 11 to 18 or up to 25 with additional needs, especially because 11 to 18, we obviously don't get the vote. So we are left out of the traditional democratic sort of apparatus. And then sort of going on to some of the other broad issues, stuff about attitudes towards young people and how that affects them. Particularly, we've highlighted the idea of sort of the next generation and where either power or decision-making ability sits and where young people's issues sit is a sort of priority within councils. And then go on to sort of an evaluation of Calderdale itself. broadly, Calderdale Council does pretty well when it comes to youth voice, especially when you compare it to other councils in Yorkshire, which is where the different youth councils across Yorkshire and the Humber often come together and do regional work, and we quite often compare our councils and see how well each of them are doing. Calderdale is one of the only ones that allows young people as co-optees on boards. We do relatively well on that aspect of it. Young people and youth and people from youth council are often invited to events and speak, and it is a really good way of making sure that it breaks down some barriers between decision makers and young people, but also make sure that young people are part of those decisions right the way through, not just at the end of decisions. There are some big areas we can improve. Main ones from youth council's perspective is we want to become more representative and more effective of our job. We do have a membership issue at the moment that went right down during COVID. A lot of memberships did. We moved to online permanently. We are back in person now, but that obviously was hard for a lot of people, especially as we had, schools were online. No one quite knew what was happening at the time. We are starting to pick up membership again, but we really want to improve it because it means we're better at our job. There is an issue with schools. Before COVID, we had a really good relationship with schools, and when we ran events and when we ran NYP elections, which are members of youth parliament, when we ran Make Your Mark votes, and when we recruited for youth council, schools were always on board. What seems to have happened is either priorities are changed or over this sort of big 2-year gap where nothing really happened because obviously schools were really focused on COVID and you couldn't really get people into schools to run things. That's died down massively and has become a massive hurdle for us. And obviously Ian Gledhill's done a lot of good work, but we want to improve that. That's we think the big issue. There's also some other stuff about West Yorkshire and exploring how councillors can work together as well, more specifically. But broadly, it's mostly good news. There's no massive glaring holes that the council's missing. There are some areas we need to improve on, and there's some projects we'd want to run about making sure that all councillors understand youth voice and understand young people's issues. But having young people on council committees is a massive step. The council is pretty dedicated to this stuff. It's just about making sure it's as effective as possible.
Perfect. I think there'll be some questions on that, but Sidesh, welcome. Do you have any further comments, Sidesh?
It's mainly what Will said, but some areas where the council could improve is where the stuff doesn't necessarily affect young people, but it would be good to have an insight in what's going on.
Right, brilliant. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, members, any questions, members? I'll kick off whilst members are getting the questions in, but please do flag your hands by raising the hand function. Will and Sidesh, what committees are you on? What council committees are you on?
So we're co-optees on Children and Young People Scrutiny and the Climate Change Working Party.
Right, okay.
We
in terms of committees that you would want to be on, what would you want to be on? When we thought this might come up, so I think we went through the big list of all the committees that were there. Obviously, strategy scrutiny is the first, but
it's an incredibly exciting title when we read it, so we were great. I think it would be nice to see when you look at sort of place-based stuff, and you look at sort of where you have town-based scrutiny things. That might be quite interesting to look at sort of having smaller youth councils there, because obviously they really understand those issues. I think I'm right in saying there's a transport committee, and a sort of jobs one as well. Those would be the sort of big two ones that we're really interested in. Obviously, because public transport is a massive issue for young people and links in with all the other stuff we do about participation, about jobs, about climate change, and jobs and skills as well, and looking how that fits in. They would probably be the big two ones we'd be interested in.
That's helpful to know, because we've also got some important people on the call who can probably instigate some change and take this back as well. So I think that's really helpful to know. Councillor Porritt.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a couple of things. Thank you very much for the report and for for coming along this evening. It's really useful to actually hear from people. It's always so important, isn't it, to hear people's actual voices rather than talking about them. So yeah, a couple of things. One was to do with, it was mentioned in I think it was Ian's report about the reduction in registration of 16 and 17-year-olds on the electoral roll. I've certainly, for sort of anecdotally, spoken to friends who didn't seem to realise that their kids could register from the age of 16. And my kids are both registered to vote from the age of 16. And then you get this sort of scrabble immediately before an election where somebody's trying to register and get their poll card and everything as they turn 18. And really to get that out there to young people so that they know that from the age of 16 they can register to vote. And the other thing I wanted to raise was about this the identity card thing that the government are bringing in or planning to bring in, which is likely to be with us by the May local elections, where you have to prove your identity. Now, I mean, obviously that's a barrier for all sorts of people, but I would have thought that's going to be a particular barrier for first-time voters. So if anybody's got any comments to make on those, that'd be really helpful. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry.
No, absolutely, Ian. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not fully understood yet why the registration of attainers has dropped. It's something that the Electoral Commission is aware of. It's aware of it happening nationally. It isn't something that's particularly local to Calderdale. We are waiting on further guidance as to what is suggested by the Commission to address that. But inevitably, there's I think the implied comment that you've made, Councillor Porritt, about further work that we can do in engaging with educational establishments to ensure that there's as much of a reminder as possible, so that there isn't that last-minute scrabble with people who are 18 at the time of an election and realise that they haven't actually registered in time to vote. That would be frustrating for them. So we will do as much as we can to remind people about that. Voter ID, yes, it's something that we have been discussing a great deal of late. Again, we are waiting on further detailed guidance to come out as to exactly how the system is to operate and how the guidance that is given informs polling station staff as to how that system is to operate. There will be steps in place to ensure that for those people who do not have any existing ID, which has a photographic part of it, that there is a certificate of voter ID that can be applied for. But again, that will require, and there will be a significant publicity campaign that we will participate in the run-up to the May elections to ensure that all people are fully aware of the ability to obtain a separate specific voter ID form if they do not have a passport or a driving license with a picture on it. Yeah, it's recognised that it'll be a significant change to the process, and it will be something that we will work hard to ensure, as we always do, that we get as well versed in exactly how it will work as we possibly can. As I said, once that guidance is published, which it hasn't yet been.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you very much, Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Chair. I think I've got three things. One of which is, I think Will raises a really interesting point about including young voices when we look at reports, and might there be therefore consideration of a mechanism to include them when a report is made? Because at the moment, if you look at the reports, there are certain things that reports from officers consider, such as climate change and so on and so forth. Maybe that's something we need to think about, how we can include them. So when reports come to scrutiny, it has their voice or has an element of interaction with them involved in it. So that's point one, which is just a quick thought that maybe we need to think about as a recommendation. Second thing, this is to Ian, would be, is there not a mechanism by which we can send out correspondence to 16, 17-year-olds or those about to turn 18, when we send out the registration docs to the household, to say to them, this is your opportunity to register. So rather than leaving it in the hands of their parents, and this is going to link to my third point, we're actually also asking the young people to do that and maybe upshift rather than downshift. And the third thing is, I think one of the issues that I think I've seen is that when you speak to people, and sometimes even young people when they come to the door, when their parents don't vote, when their parents have minimal involvement or engagement with the democratic process, it must be very hard. I was lucky; my parents were democratically quite cute and sharp, and I was brought up in a household where your right to vote was considered. You voted. Simple, you voted. But if people are coming from a background where their parents have not voted or never voted, how do you persuade a 17-year-old that a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old that this is a vital thing to do? And maybe we should start looking at that pinching as well. Because if we engage with a 17-year-old at school and they go home and they say this to the parents, they go, oh, don't vote, never voted, it's a complete waste of time, they're all in it for themselves, etc., etc. It suddenly knocks you back a bit. Thank you, Chair.
I think some of those were for Ian, and then I think some of them will be for Will and Sidesh. Shall we start with Ian first?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I think in the order that Councillor Barnes raised them, I think yes. I think Will already very articulately made the point about understanding the young person's voice in matters that are particularly relevant to them because of the impact that they will have for the long-term benefit of the borough, particularly around, as Will indicated, transport and climate. And obviously, scrutiny boards are entitled to take evidence from whoever they wish to take and regard as being important for the item that's being discussed. So I think it's been a point well made, and I think it needs to be understood that for matters of that type particularly, there should be perhaps a direct request to the Youth Council for a contribution to those type of matters if they come before scrutiny boards, so that the evidence is as comprehensive and relevant as possible. On Councillor Barnes' second point, then the household canvass, annual canvass, does include obviously the ability to register 16 and 17-year-olds, but inevitably we won't be able to address that directly to those individuals because we won't have them registered on any database that we hold to send out something that's personally addressed to them. So that is an issue that we would have, and it picks up the third point about therefore the inevitable influence that parents have on whether they pick up that annual household canvass and say, well, this is a good thing, we need to get you on this as quickly as possible, or they ignore it because they've never registered and don't wish to encourage their children to do so either. That
yeah, can I just come back on that? Because we could use the schools and the colleges because they have the data.
Yes, I know, but there are unfortunately data restraints that are imposed upon us.
No, but I'm not asking that we don't need to use the. I mean, effectively, if we use the schools as the mechanism of the delivery, or the colleges as the mechanism of the delivery, then it doesn't. There is no data issue.
Well, there might be, because it depends why the obviously. I don't go into detail of GDPR, etc. But
it's
schools
the use of data in it.
Colleges,
yeah.
Well, no, but we're not having names. We're not involving names. We are giving the school letters that they can send out, that they can put out, which are anonymised, that they can give to those at roughly the same time as the electoral. I mean, we need to start thinking a bit more than just in a straight line here, people. You know, we need to start thinking, if we're going to involve young people, we need to actually start thinking wider and not be so narrow focused. And just giving an anonymised letter to the schools, all the colleges, to give out to their pupils at roughly the same time is not going to breach GDPR.
Yeah, I think.
I understood you earlier on, Councillor Barnes, to be saying that we should write directly to the young people.
Sorry, when I meant write to them. Sorry, I apologise, Ian. Apologise if that was misunderstood. That was my fault for that. When I said write to them, I mean get some correspondence to them in some way, shape, or form. If write to them, I perhaps should have chosen my words a little carefully.
Yeah. I understand that, and I think, you know, it's a point well made that we will do all that we can to ensure that the message is given through as many outlets as we possibly can, and those are mentioned on the report. But yes, obviously we will consider all aspects, because it is important that, as you rightly said, young people need to be considered as independent thinkers, and their ability to decide for themselves as to whether they wish to engage with the democratic process, and we need to give them every opportunity to do that. And I'll certainly speak with the electoral team about whether we are able to do more than we're currently doing at the moment.
Perfect.
And I think that picks up the third point as well, which is about how do we bypass parents who are reluctant to allow their children to engage. So yeah, that would cover that off.
Yeah, Councillor Kearney.
Thanks, Chair. I was kind of cringing when this thought came into my head, really, because a lot of times, you know, whenever we discuss anything involving young people, we always, the temptation's always there to sort of like push the onus onto education. But in this case, I know that there is a citizenship type course on the curriculum at secondary schools. Do we as a council get sort of any information from schools on like how engaged their, you know, like the pupils or the students that are eligible to take that class are, and what the take up is, you know, like with the whole like the whole population of the school that's eligible for it. The other thing, and it sort of leads, it was kind of provoked by the discussion between Councillor Barnes and Mr. Hughes, you know, like the ability to write to, you know, like name a young person on a letter. But the leaflet says that all they need to be able to register at 16 and 17-year-old is a national insurance number. Now, I might be out of date with this because I'm, you know, like because of the age I am, but I think you still get a card. Hopefully, you still get a card through the door with your. Do you not? No. But you must get You must get told what your national insurance number is.
You get a letter that you must not lose. Cards are sadly a thing of the past.
Is that right?
Yeah, I know.
Well,
my kid's got a letter and an instruction not to lose it. One of them may have lost the letter.
Well, do we know whether that letter tells people, you know, like now that you've got this information, it means that you're eligible to register on the voters roll in anticipation of the first election after you're 18? And if not, is that not something that we as a council could recommend to the part of the state that writes that letter, you know, to get a change in wording? And then the last bit's just a kind of comment, really. I mean, it's kind of, I go out door knocking quite a lot, and this might provoke me to, well, I hope it'll provoke me to inquire, you know, is there any 16, 17-year-olds in the house? Do you know that they can register, you know, early and all the rest of it? Or if somebody comes to the door and they might be around of that age, that, you know, I'd like to ask them about it, sort of thing. So a couple of questions and a comment. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
So the first one about data collection, I'm minded to bring Will or Sidesh or Claire in on that one. Do you get access to any data on people who are interested? Like how do you go about persuading people to join?
So we don't get any sort of stats from schools about how many people do PSHE lessons or so much. Usually those sorts of lessons are mandatory, usually right the way up to A level. There is a big thing with school trusts and academies. Those lessons and citizenship lessons, they have a lot more control over. So when I was in year 8, 9, they changed it to what they called iGen, and they sort of shifted the whole curriculum, which sort of became our PSHE lessons, our citizenship lessons, that were completely different to any other schools. So it's an incredibly varied bit of the curriculum, and some schools do it, 2 hours a week. Some schools do it 1 hour a week. It's not covered as much, and we have a lot less say, and councils have a lot less say of actually what's taught in there. There's certain things that they have to cover, but how they do it is schools have a lot more flexibility. So I think it would be good to try and work with schools on those sort of issues and come up with one of the big campaigns, national campaigns that have come up a lot, is a curriculum for life. So that covers stuff about how do you do your finances, how do you register to vote, and how do you cook. Often colleges tend to sometimes look at this stuff when you're in your sixth form years and doing your A levels and you might be going off to uni. They try and start bringing in that stuff, and some schools will do less assemblies and lessons on getting kids to register to vote. Barnsley Youth Council do some really good work on getting democratic services in schools, and they just set up stalls with iPads and just get kids to register to vote there and then, which works really well. And Barnsley Youth Council is very proud of this scheme, and they should be. I think actually when it comes to the data of it, we don't have any.
Yeah.
The school services might, or they could request it, but we've never seen any.
We've written some lesson plans though,
Yeah.
for a thing on just having the practice of voting by asking, which we've sent out to schools. Again, we're obviously not targeting the right teacher in school, and I think that's part of the thing that happened as a result of COVID, that people sort of shifted, and people who were heads of PSHE or citizenship kind of changed role or moved on, and we kind of didn't quite keep up with it. So playing a bit of catch up. But with the Youth Council and with Ian, we've written a lesson plan for schools for a citizenship lesson just on democracy, which is about picking the 3 things that matter most to you and making a case as to why the rest of the class should vote for it or not. And again, that's completely apolitical, if you like. But again, that's something that Will, Sudesh, and the rest of the Youth Council have kind of promoted in their own schools, but we're having difficulty reaching out to the schools, partly because I think they've already written their timetable. They'll have written their curriculums a year in advance sometimes. But it's about trying to keep on knocking on that door, and anybody who can help us with that, we'd be very grateful for. Is that okay, Will and Sudesh?
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah. So it's we've been wanting to do a lot of work on it, and it's one of the areas where Youth Council can do some works. There is that flexibility, but it is incredibly hard, as you say, especially because we obviously can't demo the lessons as much as we would like to. On your second point, Councillor, the stuff about the national insurance number, I was frantically trying to find my letter, and I'm hoping I haven't lost it. I think my mum might have taken it off me immediately and put it in a file somewhere so I didn't lose it. I think it is worth doing stuff around that time and making sure that when you go out, there is some voting happens. I think the best way to do that is through schools, and like I said, how Barnsley Youth Council do it. I think once we try and get into sort of looking at some data issues, it becomes way more complicated and also can become less effective. Actually, if you have people just there signing people up, it helps massively, rather than trying to get letters out explaining it, making sure that they do get out there and they do get out there safely. The thing about knocking, when councillors go door knocking and, during election campaigns and stuff, Youth Council might be interested in writing some pamphlet stuff. I don't know if this crosses any apolitical lines with us giving, pamphlets to political parties. Probably not if we give them to most of them, and if we had a sort of broad consensus of all the sort of major parties represented would like to take this up. But again, I have a feeling that might be slightly too late, as it becomes much more reactionary rather than a young people want to go out and vote. And I think that links to the sort of whole culture of you do want to see change, and this is the whole thing with voting across age ranges, especially for young people. There's an idea that really it doesn't matter. And I think there is something about making sure that feedback a lot of the time, if someone wants to see something happening, either taking that on board, or if it doesn't happen, explaining why not. It's a big thing with youth councils, and actually where one of the areas where council can improve is making sure there's, when we do work with councils, making sure there's that constant dialogue after it's done and after it's being implemented about if it's been carried on, how's it going? If it hasn't, why not? That sort of stuff. So I think there is, when voting comes, there's a lot of room for improvement, but
Good. Perfect. Yeah.
Examples.
Yeah. Thank you, Will, for that. I've just got a mindful of the clock, and we've got another big item after this as well. So if members could keep the questions as succinct as possible, that would be appreciated. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I think you raised a point just now. You said that people can get signed up. So is that something that somebody could go to a school with a register and get somebody signed up? Because I wasn't sure if that was something that you could actually do, because that does sound like a really good idea. The other question is, how do we sort of work with children in temporary accommodation and things like that? How do we make sure that they are also getting access to justice, sort of to democracy? And the other question is really for Ian. The annual canvas report thing that's changed in 2020. I thought it made it a little bit more tricky that you had to answer it, or you could, be taken off it if you hadn't answered the question. So I wasn't sure whether there was a wider problem with that new system. I can't remember exactly what it was, but there you go. That's
Ian. Could I just add to this question as well, Ian, if I may? I'm just interested to know, in terms of statutory responsibilities, are we obliged to encourage people to register to vote in terms of like our actual responsibilities, which we are mandated to do?
Yes, the ERO, the Electoral Registration Officer, has a duty to ensure that the register of electors is up to date and has to take specific steps to ensure that we do all we can through initial canvassing to start with, through the post, to officers going and checking on a non-return as to why that hasn't been completed. So yes, we have that duty, we undertake it, and people also have a duty to register. And it's a common issue that in places like Australia, people can be prosecuted for failing to register and to vote. I think it's 98% or something like that of people who are registered, which is in excess of where we are as a country. But we do what we can within the duties that are applicable to us. So yeah, there is that responsibility which we try and fulfil through the annual canvass. And going back to Councillor Smith's point, yes, we do follow up where we think we haven't had a return for a particular property, and that's part of the annual canvass process that we undertake in order that we can publish to the register on the 1st of December. So we're on with it. Well, we will be on with it and are on with it now.
But can I just ask, so you can't go into a school and sign up 16 and 17-year-olds? That was sort of that. Sorry, Will, if that's me misunderstanding.
I think from what Will was saying, that was it Barnsley. Will, you were saying that is undertaken in Barnsley. So it obviously is something that they've checked and regard as being perfectly appropriate. I'm not so sure that we do that in any schools, but it's something that, again, we can look at to see if we can encourage and avoid this issue of the drop in 16 to 17-year-olds registering. And maybe that's something that the Electoral Commission will come out in its guidance and recommend based on examples such as Barnsley.
Very good. Councillor Thornbert?
Sorry, you didn't answer the question about children in care homes or in temporary accommodation. How do we ensure that they get registered?
So we would certainly, as corporate parents, look to ensure that we take that responsibility properly. And obviously, if there's accommodation that is used for 16 and 17-year-olds to be in that accommodation, then we would look to ensure that that's picked up as part of that annual return and canvass, to ensure that we don't fall foul of exactly what Councillor Barnes was saying before about parents not being responsible enough to make sure that their own 16 and 17-year-olds are registered. We should be taking the lead on that.
Yeah. Councillor Thornbert?
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Carney did cover what I was going to say regarding the national insurance number, what you receive on your 16th birthday or around about then. We all this collecting data, it all costs money. Everything costs money, but using such as national insurance, which gets directed to the individual 16-year-old, also working with different external organisations. I don't know who covers it. Is it Department Work and Pensions? And it's trying to do it more effectively, more direct, because it's a good idea what Barnes has undertaken, because it is an easy process. Your canvas form comes back, you go online, job's done within minutes. And I think it's just explained to how easy it is. But also there is an element sort of telling, not educating, but sort of advising 16, 17-year-olds that it does assist you being on the electoral register financially, because that's what later in life, when you start going for mortgages and loans and everything else, even phone contract, they do credit checks, and most of the time they do. If you aren't on the electoral register or electoral roll, it does affect it. Thank you, Chair.
Good. I don't know if that was more of a comment or a question. I think it was a statement. Councillor Sutherland.
Thank you, Chair. This is more a question for Will and Sudesh if they're up for answering it. We've obviously got a lot of different types of elections now in terms of tiers. So I noticed in the report there were quite a few mentions about what's happening regionally in West Yorkshire and what's happening with the mayor. You have your general election, which everybody knows about and garners the most attention, and then you've got the most thrilling ones, which are ours as council elections. So I just wanted to ask, how does that impact on young people? Because sometimes getting people to vote, even just in a national election, is a big push. Getting them to think about the other type of elections that are out there, electing your mayor or electing your local councillor, can sometimes be a whole different kettle of fish. And I just wondered if you had any view on those different types of elections, and if there's anything in them that is more grabbing for young people, because particularly the mayor and Tracy Brabin, she mentioned jobs and public transport, and those were the two things that you earlier on have said are very important to you and what your group are looking into.
Yeah, so I think obviously 18 to 25, which I think is the youngest bracket they take data for, is one of the lowest, or might be the lowest turnout when it comes to young people. And obviously that's outside of Youth Council's age range. And I know there was some talks a while back of making mayoral elections down to 16, but obviously that never happened. I think it's partly during elections, it's making sure that people know that they're happening and people know that they're important. So when we look at during the last mayoral elections, first mayoral elections, we did some youth hustings that we got a couple of candidates there for. There can often be where Youth Council tries to do work with getting people onto the register and making sure that councillors in their term are committed to working with young people. because obviously we don't have any say of who councillors are. The most we can do is advise and scrutinise you during your terms. There is also some areas that have tried to do some stuff looking at doing hustings for different events, or looking at trying to get political candidates to endorse youth voice, or trying to get young people to advocate that there is an election going on. There's been some cases of them running into issues with talking about there's elections going on and maybe not promoting certain candidates as much as others, whether or not that's intentional or not. There's sometimes been, some complaints made about that. I think it is important to make sure that all elections are seen as important, and obviously quite often mayoral elections happen at the same time as, or they try and get them at the same time as either council or general elections. That's just sort of how terms work. Again, I think this is somewhere where political education comes into it, and it's about councils working with people and youth councils working with other young people to make sure we understand what these elections mean. Sidesh, you might have other things to add. I might have missed something.
Yeah, like you said, in the education, if they know the different types of the different types of elections and how it's going to affect them, it might make them more likely to try and vote.
Yeah. Good. Councillor Kearney, last question.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Part of what I was this kind of additional thoughts that are provoked by something that Councillor Thornber said. He talks about the benefit of being on the voters roll because places use it as a way of electronically confirming your address, so that you don't have to take a bit of paper with a council tax bill or something like that. But I had a quick scan of the pamphlet, and I couldn't really see anything that doesn't look as if that's pointed out in there that that's one of the benefits of being on the voters roll. So if it's just at the draft stage and that's why we've got it, could something like that be shoehorned in? The other thing, and this will just really apply if it is finalised. Does the council have a supply of hard copies of the pamphlets for the likes of us, to maybe have us, when we go out canvassing or whatever, so that we've got them, we could have them on us, and if we have an opportunity of handing one over, would present itself.
Yeah, I think that's one for Ian.
Yeah, I'll certainly take a further look at that pamphlet, Councillor, and see if there's any reason why we can't put on the point that Councillor Thornber quite properly made about the importance of being on a register of electors, not just for voting purposes, but for credit reference check purposes as well. I'll also pick up the point that it was Councillor Barnes mentioned earlier about national insurance letter, whether there's anything that we can lobby for inclusion on that, to remind people that when they receive it, one of the first things they should do with that number is to register to vote. And the third point that was the hard copy of the leaflet. I'll certainly look into that as well.
Perfect, and that's a good way to end. Wow. I think Mike wanted a few final words, I believe.
It was just quick. I mean, Ian's picked up one of the points about the GWP, but if Will and Sidesh and Claire are willing, me or Bella, probably Bella, who's a lot closer to these issues than me because she can remember being at school, is that we could meet and make sure we don't lose some of these issues and pick up one or two of the issues, particularly about getting comments on scrutiny reports that aren't children, young people scrutiny board, for example. I think we can probably come up with a few techniques and ideas between us to take some of these things forward.
We'd love to do that, and we're happy to work with you or Bella anytime.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. So first of all, I want to thank Ian for coming along, and I think we've just finished. He's got 5 minutes to spare now.
Perfect timing, Chair. I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Exactly. So thank you very much, and thank you to Claire, and thank you, Will. and Sidesh as well for coming. We really do appreciate your time, and it's been a really insightful session. So I think those comments you made have definitely been noted, as you've just heard from Ian, who's a key mover and shaker in this field. So there we go. So thank you very much. Okay then, on to the next item then. In that case, we've got the corporate plan. Can I ask, so I know we've got Robin and Jez. Can I ask who's taking the lead on the Robin?
Yes, Chair. I think Councillor Scullion is opening as acting leader. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. Councillor Scullion, anything to add?
Clearly, I need to. I'm basically the fluffer. You know, I have to do the warm up for the main act of the officers. Thank you, Robin. I just want to say a few words by way of context in terms of this corporate plan. Corporate plans aren't new. This originally was 2018 when we started working on the 2024 stuff. So in some ways, this is a sort of refresh, really, of a new refresh of that original development, the plan. I have to say that in terms of setting the context for the discussion this evening, this, even though it's a high-level strategic plan, the context has changed tremendously, even since this went to Cabinet, whenever it was, 3-4 weeks ago. But I think some of the things that are in there as context are absolutely crucial. Chair, I don't know if you want to say to the young people that it's fine for them to leave.
Well, absolutely. It's fine. It's one of those things, isn't it? When it gets to this time, we've just been discussing about engaging in meetings and everything. So you're welcome to stay. But of course, if you do want to leave, then please do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Understood, and I won't take it personally. I think there's a Calderdale context. I mean, yes, there's the national context, of course, and so on, but there's a specific Calderdale context. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to keep mentioning this every opportunity I get, which is to do with recovery from the flooding and the pandemic. If you recollect, in 2020, February the 19th, we had the latest very bad flood. You know, we have had 4 floods in 8 years, serious floods in 8 years. You know, this is a council that gets regularly battered, council area that gets regularly battered. And so we went from that February 19th, 2020, we basically then went into lockdown in March 2020. So we went flooding, emergency, recovery, straight into pandemic. So we've got a double whammy that some councils don't have. So that's part of the context of where we are as Calderdale in looking at the corporate situation. We're also now, of course, in the middle, hopefully the middle, and looking towards the end of the cost of living crisis. I don't really need to say any more about that, but it's important for us as a council because we always pick up the pieces. You know, we are there for people in those times of need. And I think I need to also mention the context of inflation, because we've been worried about the context of businesses, for individuals managing their household income. But of course, as a council, we've also got to pay our bills, and the energy costs and construction inflation, and inflation generally is hitting us as a council. So that's part of the context that this corporate plan was written in. I think the fourth thing and last thing that I think creates our context is extraordinarily increased demand for our services, particularly, I'm afraid, services for children. Children needing particular help from our social services, children, I'm afraid, coming into care, and also older people. Yes, of course, in terms of the demographics, you would expect the numbers to rise of older people, but there are more older people presenting and their families presenting to the council's front door in order to need services. So are we downhearted? No. And the corporate plan, I hope, gives some sort of sense of the fact that we still keep wide-ranging aspirations for the borough. You know, we're local government. We are You know, we have the universal services, roads, etc., parks, etc., and we have the very specialist services, and we carry on doing these things, and we still have aspirations to make Calderdale the best place it can be. And you'll see within the corporate plan the importance of the 3 priorities, the focus on the 3 priorities about reducing inequalities, clearly important to us. And you'll have seen in previous committee meetings the figures about life expectancy in different parts of the borough. We still think that's completely unacceptable. And we know that there are things that can be done to improve that. We know that building on our strong, thriving towns is important. Now, the 6 market towns that make up Calderdale are not everything, of course. There are lots of rural areas, semi-rural areas, and larger communities, which also deserve attention. But in some ways, that is the backbone of Calderdale. It's the nature of Calderdale, the strong, thriving towns. And finally, definitely not last, in terms of importance, of equal importance, is our work on tackling climate change and climate action. And if any of you have not filled in your climate action plan consultation, please do so. I think Councillor Patient will be very, very grateful, but we really need your thoughts in terms of what really are the priorities. Where should we focus action first? And you'll see within the plan there are the 3 aspirations, the 3 priorities, but there are also 12 deliverables in terms of what we're really trying to focus on pushing and driving, particularly this first year. And I'll leave Chief Exec and others to say something more about those. But I just wanted to say that this is looking towards 2024. We're in 2022 now. And clearly we're going to celebrate 50 years as a council, the creation of Calderdale Council from the predecessor boroughs and bodies. It's been a very interesting 50 years, or will have been. We're at this particular moment in time, and the corporate plan, as I say, can only capture in some ways and refresh some of those things for this moment in time. But we really think that it gives some sense of some of the immediate urgency of things we've really got to keep tackling, and some of the longer term aspirations that we want for the people of Calderdale. And I'll stop there and pass over to the Chief Executive Chair, if I may. Any hard questions can go to him or to Jez Roberts, who I think is here as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Leader. So as Councillor Scullion has said, this is a strategic document. It's very important that we, as an organisation, set out the big deliverables, and we're using the 2024 timescale, but there is a heavy emphasis on the next 12 months. And as Councillor Scullion has said, we did that because we thought that's the thing that would potentially have a level of traction and consistency, and we could at least set out what would happen that time. Actually, as has been said, some of that has already changed in recent weeks. We're in a very volatile environment. We sitting beneath all of this is the biggest workforce challenge that the sector has had, certainly in my career. The potential scale of a further financial challenge based upon building on the significant, massive challenge that we've been through over the last decade, and just the context around social care versus everything else the council does. So I meet every new member of staff, and we're recruiting actually more staff than we have for some time, and partly that is the churn in the public sector and all sectors at the moment, the changing workforce that we're seeing. And what I say is, when I came to Calderdale, or just over a decade ago, we spent about 49 pence in every pound on children, adult social care and public health. We will now be spending just about 70 pence in the pound on those things, and all the other things that the council does, many of which are the universal visible services that the public think is what a council is for, whether it's waste, street scene, roads, maintenance, leisure centre facilities, libraries, parks, is part of the other, within the other 600 services that councils run. So that's clearly very difficult, both politically difficult and also operationally difficult to manage. And all councils are struggling with that. So that's the context. And just on, say, on SEND, for instance, education plans, in the last 12 months, number of young people on those plans has increased by 25%. We are one of the councils that is not part of an intensive special review about the costs of SEND. There are now 60 councils that are effectively in intervention. You'll know that many councils are, and a few have reached a point where they are effectively, technically we can't be bankrupt, but very close to that. So it's tough times, but we've still got lots of brilliant staff every day doing brilliant things and working very hard. None of us want to deny services or say no or come into public services to make savings, but that's the context we're in and that you'll understand. So we do have a mechanism to monitor delivery of this plan. We have the corporate leadership team regularly review through outcomes performance of finance group. We report into the cabinet. We're a politically led organisation. This is politically led, as Councillor Scullion said, in terms of aligning throughout the document to the 3 political priorities of the administration. And I think I'll just say, rather than going through all the deliverables in turn, that already some of these have developed, but some of them have become even more important than ever. So under reducing inequalities, clearly the cost of living is a massive challenge. We're fortunate to have a very strong anti-poverty strategy. We do all of this in partnership. We have a brilliant voluntary sector. We have strong relationships with all our partners across all sectors. And we know that's going to be a real focus. And we're pivoting services to respond to that. We're thinking about how new opportunities may emerge through the combined authority to utilise resources. We'll use the National Household Fund to support those most affected in that respect. Just on strong towns, despite all the political change, we are operating on a get on with it and get it done model for our towns fund, our future high streets, our heritage action zone in Salisbury Bridge. We're the only council in England that's got all 3 of those. Towns are really important to us, as you know, and staff have done brilliantly to bring that investment in, and we want to deliver it in partnership with our communities. The local plan, you'll know, is at a very significant moment, and I'll just say that, and we are responding to the final element of the modifications consultation before we move that one forward with the examiner. And climate action has been highlighted, and we live a climate emergency. So this has been approved by Cabinet. We're keen to get more comments and observations. It's a very important reference point for what will be the LGA Corporate Peer Challenge we will have February next year. It's a start point and a reference point for them to say, well, what are the most important things? And it's not always easy for local government because we do so many things with so many people. And for a place like Calderdale, it has rural, urban, different priorities across our place to say, well, what are the most important things? So this is our attempt to do that. Thank you, Chair, and we're happy to take questions.
Absolutely, thank you very much. Members, have you got any questions? Councillor Kearney?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was kind of pausing there, hoping that somebody else would put their hand up before me. I had a kind of few questions. I mean, I'm aware that it's a kind of high level document, so it doesn't go into nitty gritty of detail and stuff like that. But I'm hoping I'm okay, like trying to get a wee bit of that in here. So one of the things that I'd spotted was, and it's not like a question, this is just a kind of observation, that the report talks about the adoption of the local plan, and it still says September, which was last month, and the consultations being put forward to, well, it closed a couple of days ago. I'm sort of hoping that will get updated so that it's a bit more accurate. There was a section on environmental blight, and it sort of highlights you know, a couple of things that the council can do to try and fight things like fly tipping. It talks about, you know, on the online reporting and the, you know, like CCTV, and it sort of talks about, you know, like improving those, or introducing a refreshed process. I'm taking it that means planned improvement. But for me, that there's another thing that the council does as well, and it tracks down, or it tries to track down, like landowners where people report fly tipping that happens to, you know, be on land that we're not responsible for. And the response that you get when you report it, you know, it's a kind of standard wording that sort of says, you know, if we're aware of who the landowner is, you know, we'll bring it to their attention, blah blah blah. So like that's not really mentioned in the report, but I'm hoping I'm okay asking to sort of find out, you know, what if there are any plans to be you know, to improve how we track down, you know, like the other landowners. The other thing I was wondering, it was to do with there's a bit that talks about like the relationship with Suez without, yeah, it does name them.
Shall we take the first question? I think it's quite a meaty question. So
yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, I'm quite happy to come back in.
Yeah, we'll take it in turns. Robin.
Yeah, so well, I think so. So there's a common strand through a lot of this. I think Councillor Kinney's right that it's a high-level document seeking to set out these are the big issues, and I think we've reflected the fact that environmental blight and the quality of the public realm is a big issue for people. I think it's a levelling up issue, whether I think that term is still around. It's an issue of quality of life, and it disproportionately affects the poorest and most deprived communities. So that's why it's there. What we've set out we will do is so that it gives it that level of focus, and so it means we will strategically oversee and seek to drive improvements. Behind this document, what you'll see at the last page is a huge amount of data and information and other plans. So this is the high level summary. So the key place where that's overseen in a partnership sense is the Community Safety Partnership. We have the ward groups that work with all our partners, and particularly the police, and with local community groups and voluntary sector colleagues to tackle that. What we've said we'll do in this plan is seek to use digital and data to better report and better improve the response. What we I'm not going to say here is that we're going to have significant additional people resource to do that in the council. What we also need to do is support and assist our community organisations and communities to work alongside us to report and respond to these issues. And land ownership is a very complex issue, as you'll know, in all sorts of sense around both planning enforcement, street enforcement, but what we've said we'll do is I think there's still some improvements we can make through digital and tech to improve the quality of reporting, the quality of evidence gathering, to support those that ultimately prosecute and take to court the most serious instances of fly tipping and environmental blight. And we've done that. And we've done that at scale. And we've done that on some significant issues leading to prosecution outcomes. So I think I'd say that is going to, I reassure you, that is a focus of the most senior strategic level, politically and in officers and through the partnership. And it's something that we will monitor and track through the Community Safety Partnership that's outlined there. And the second question from Councillor Kearney as well.
Yeah, thanks for that. The other one is, like, you know, it talks about like discussions with Suez.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Reviewing the contract and whatnot. I mean, I'm not sure whether it would be this committee that it would come back to, but I take it it'll come back to a committee after those that review, so that, you know, we can find out, you know, that once it's been completed, the range of things that we'll ask them to continue doing that they're doing well and improve on, that they're maybe not doing so well on.
So that will be, I'm absolutely certain that it'll be the place community scrutiny panel that will want to work in depth on that review. What we are doing is, and you'll see that's quite a deliberate, explicit area we know between now and 24 we do need to review, both to consider the future of that contract and what the options might be, and also do that review in the context of the Environment Act, which it's also, have to say, since we wrote this, potentially may alter, given some thinking that I'm just picking up, and I've briefed Cabinet on earlier this week, but we don't yet know that with another new Secretary of State, we'll see if that continues. But there is a movement potentially to standardise waste and recycling across all local authorities. There is a potential for that, the dates to do that standardisation and even making it compulsory being reviewed. And that would potentially allow us to retain elements of the things that we do, which I have to say are in excess of some of our neighbours, particularly around food waste collection in terms of the level of frequency. I do realise and recognise there are issues about member concerns, public concerns about the quality delivery of elements of that contract as well. So that will all be part of a review, and we will work with the Place Committee on that.
Yeah, good. Councillor Barnes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And in answer to Councillor Kearney, I got distracted, which is why I let him go first. I think a couple of points. I think, firstly, in terms of reducing inequality with section number 4, we would deliver the social value charter. I think that's vital. I think we all we all expect that our financial settlement next year and then in oncoming years might be challenging, and that might be the understatement of the decade. But I think, you know, I was at Joint Health Scrutiny today, where the HRI A&E is 70% locally procured. So 70% of that 15 million project is going to be procured locally, and I think these are great things that we should be able to do, and I think we should look at the procurement process to make sure it is lean and mean and can take advantage rather than have to miss things because of a potentially antiquated process. So I think that's a point. And I think the second point is on travel. We are almost completely car dependent in the UK. And I think, you know, there's some good potential work being done in Skirker, and I think there's some good potential work that we are not shouting about. You know, we're one of 19 local authorities fighting for a slice of a cake in order to improve our streets, to improve cycling and walking. And these are things that people aren't aware of, and I think we need to make people more aware of it. And I think, but we need really to look at how, and that really needs a lot of work with the mayor and with Wicker, in order to how we can improve transport and reduce our dependency on the car. It is not going to be a populist manifesto pledge for anybody, because we all love our car, you know, and we all know the reasons why, but we cannot continue, especially with the geographics of Calderdale, to continue to be car dependent. And I think that's a point we really need to look at and work on and work hard on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. I really welcome on the first point, really welcome that sentiment around the social value charts, where again, it was a very deliberate inclusion, and something I know that Cabinet feels strongly about as well. And we need to potentially try to retain the local pound. There's, as you may know, Sharon Rogers and her team have done some excellent work with procurement around community wealth building and the ability to recycle and the multiplier effect of local pound. Just actually, just a couple of days ago, I've got first iteration of a refresh of our contract procedure rules, which will go through the processes from there, from Debbie Gorn, our lead on procurement, to potentially, within the legal frameworks, as much as we can, seek to privilege and prioritise local procurement. And it's great to hear at HRI, and I know there's been a lot of work between our planning and our procurement people in the council and the CHFT on that, so that's great to hear, and it's a real priority. On the car and on travel, I agree, and there's maybe, although I know it's Councillor Scullion said officers will take questions. I think Councillor Scullion is a real expert on this and is on the Transport Committee, so I wonder whether Councillor Scullion might want to respond to that, because there is
Lovely forward pass there,
Yeah,
Robin.
well,
You know.
Yeah, well, there is some excellent. I mean, there's the work around the Park Ward, North Halifax, and the cycling and walking. There's that work we're doing, the work we're looking at doing around canal towpaths. But actually, Councillor Scullion has huge expertise on this, so I do think she may want to answer as well.
Thank you. I think that's what's called a hospital pass in rugby terms, actually. I think the point you make, Councillor Barnes, is a very good one in terms of some of the work that we're doing. We don't shout about enough. I was in a meeting this afternoon about the application we've made to government in terms of walking and cycling in an area going down from King Cross through Skircote towards Copley and looking at the potential there. And 19 councils have been shortlisted and only 3 will get that money. Now, it does mean that you are constantly in this competitive round where you put a lot of officer time into designing these things with no guarantee that you get the money. But we learn a lot from each of those processes. But I think the challenge is a national challenge. It isn't just a Calderdale challenge, although we've got very specific features here that make it an interesting challenge. But it's government and the private sector working in conjunction with local authorities. One of the things I keep saying in transport circles at the West Yorkshire level is Calderdale is not a city. Not everybody goes into city. There is no point in having park and rides in sort of enormous park and rides in some parts of our borough, because that's just not the way our transport works. Our transport is quite... And the other thing is, we do need to understand that we will always have a dependency on the car in Calderdale. It's a nonsense to think that everybody will be cycling, but that doesn't let us off the hook in terms of doing more on walking and cycling, and to make sure that people have got a choice in terms of public transport, bus and rail. Bus is our salvation in Calderdale. Yes, we've got heavy rail going through the borough, but actually, if you're on the hilltops, you've got to get to that rail. So making our buses work reliably, reasonably priced, and with a decent frequency is our mantra, really, those of us who are on the Transport Committee for Calderdale, across parties, actually. But it isn't going to be easy, and we won't pretend that we can do it alone either.
Good. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Yeah, my question is, well, I've got 2 questions. One is to ask Councillor Scullion how confident she is that we are halfway through this recession, because maybe she knows something we don't. The other one was on the link between digitalisation used as a tool to sort of improve neighbourhoods, and that there's that juxtaposition of people on lower sort of income maybe not having the same access or same digital literacy. So I wonder how those are going to marry up. And final point is on the key deliverable on asylum seeker and refugees in the borough. I just think that's under public services remit. I think we are a welcoming borough. I think we're amazing, and I know that Calderdale Council has gone out of its way to support people, but I do feel that the no recourse for public funds is one of the bigger problems that we result in having a lot of people that are homeless in our borough that don't have recourse to public funds, and I think that's something that's maybe, I know we have got some sort of support available, but I think that's something that we can't as a council really control. We don't have much gift over. Anyway, sort of comments really, but thank you.
Yeah. Councillor
Scullion. Thank you, Chair. Councillor Smith is probably right that I was being overly optimistic in terms of cost of living crisis. We'll see what the fiscal statement is on now November the 17th. I always live in hope that local government will be properly funded, and that we will be able to do a lot to alleviate the situation that people find themselves in. I also know that Calderdale is a fantastically caring community and resilient, partly learned through the floods, and therefore people do in communities look out for each other. So we're in the middle of it. How long that middle lasts is certainly not the beginning, because we're already through the beginning. We're in the middle of the cost of living crisis, but I don't know when we begin the end period. In terms of digitisation, for me that sits with our priority about inequalities, really, because we all know that in taking part in society these days, from young people indeed to older people, being able to access modern life digitally is really, really important. And that means that we as a council, we really have got to improve our act in terms of things like, as Councillor Kearney said, in terms of things like fly tipping and so on. For many people, they want to be able to report things and get a feedback, you know, in terms of what's happened to that on their phones, on the go, and we're not there yet. We really need to raise our game about those things. So digitisation for me sits very much with inequalities. And I would agree with you in terms of asylum seekers. Calderdale is really a really, really good place. And leaving aside asylum seekers and refugees for a moment, I have been very impressed by the way in which the people of Calderdale have responded to the Ukrainian people coming. We've had people coming from other boroughs in West Yorkshire, which shall not be named, in order to try and understand what it is Calderdale are doing. In terms of no recourse to public funds, though, that is a national issue, and we deal with people as we are legally obliged to deal with people. But of course, you're right that Calderdale is a warm community, really, and I do put my faith in that. Thank you for those points, though.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Right. So I'll bring this item to a close now. I know we've got Mike. I'll bring in Mike and then Councillor Dacre, but I'll bring this item to a close. Mike.
Just quickly to say, in response to Councillor Kearney and to Robin's point, is that Andrew Pitts has already bought an item to place Scrutiny Board about the waste contract and has committed to bringing it back. So that is being picked up at the Place Scrutiny Board. And on November the 17th, the Place Scrutiny Board is taking a comprehensive look at enforcement, which I think picks up some of the points that Councillor Kearney was making. And Derek Benn is currently in the process of arranging visits for members of the Place Scrutiny Board to observe enforcement in action.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dacre.
Yes, thank you. So just quickly in response to Councillor Smith's comments about the risk of digital exclusion, just to try and reassure people that whenever programmes are being rolled out that might involve a digital element, we do have an ambition to always consider what that could mean for somebody who is not, or the risks of digital exclusion for somebody who's not familiar with or doesn't have access to digital media. And so we consider it, and we also look for ways to avoid any exclusion, and we do other work such as work that's done with Lloyds Bank, trying to provide second-hand equipment to people who don't have it, providing internet access obviously to people in our libraries who can't afford it at home. And it's very challenging because obviously we're hearing now that people are turning off the broadband because they're trying to save money. But we are trying always to find ways to do our best to ensure that people are not digitally excluded. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Councillor Scullion. Thank you to Robin and Jez for your time. I really appreciate it. It's the golden thread. I think that's the takeaway. The corporate plan's a golden thread through council policy. Perfect. Thank you very much. On to the next item then, in that case, the work programme. Mike?
Very, very quickly, Chair, I should say that the programme for this meeting was arranged by Lauren, who's now moved on, as you will all know, and you stuck with me for a while, so I'll attempt to be somewhere near as efficient and effective as Lauren was in supporting you. Just to just to say that we've been working at the cost of living work. The working party's met a couple of times, and we'll add that report to your next meeting to bring that back for to be approved. So that's all I want to say about the work programme at this stage, Chair.
Perfect. Any questions there? No. Well, in that case, that's it. Good. Thank you everyone for attending. Really do appreciate your time. And enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Dear, just had a next door neighbour boy who's been locked out, banging on the door.
Oh no.
So, poor thing. Anyway, I must go. Sorry, I sort of was shifting about a bit in the middle of it then.
No. Okay.
Bye.
See you soon.
Bye.
How do we get rid of Councillor Barnes, Diane?
That's a good question. Oh, he's gone.
Well, thank you. That was all right,
All right.
wasn't it?
Yeah, one too bad. Thanks, Mike.
Isn't that lad Will sharp?
Yeah, he's very good, isn't he?
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very switched on.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. All right. See you later, Mike. Bye.
Okay.